Hello everyone, welcome to my week 5 vlog. Today I will be discussing the reading pop culture and rhetorical act reading that was assigned during week 5 of class. I'm going to start with the reading pop culture reading, and this week we had two essays. Essay number 1 was Violent Media is Good for Kids by Gerard Jones, and Secret Skin, an essay in unitard theory by Michael Chabon. In the Violent Media essay, Gerard Jones talks about how the violent character of the Incredible Hulk in comic books that he read as a child helped him come out of his shell. He actually talks about how the Incredible Hulk helped him realize his dream of writing comic books and eventually became a well-known comic book writer. And his point is that while comic books, while violent, can help teach us things like tolerance and pacifism. Lots of media may be violent, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from it and then it's not beneficial. I mean, look at history. History is incredibly violent. History is full of violence, and yet we still learn history and we can learn from history. Those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Also, the Bible's full of violence and people still read it. The next point he made was that children and their imaginations can often be very violent. All children like to play pretend. All children use their imaginations to play. Children like to use their creativity and to immerse themselves in a world of fantasy, and this fantasy can be violent, but we have to remember that it's not real and it's not necessarily harmful. Vivid and fantastical imaginations can produce violent thoughts and stories in children, but that's completely normal. They're just kids. Pretty much all kids have a very vivid imagination. We really need to just let them play and realize that their imaginations alone cannot hurt anyone. The next point he makes is that violent media, whether it's video games, movies, or just children's play pretend, let people relate to characters. They let people relate themselves to a particular hero who is going through their journey, or they let people rebel against the system. With these different forms of violent media, people can act out different fantasies and ideas without limits, and in doing this, they can learn to control their rage and their anger. Lastly, he states that children's craving for imaginary violence or adventure is not really wrong or dangerous, but it can actually be channeled and turned into something wonderful, like his love of the Incredible Hulk comics helped him to become a comic book writer when he was younger. In the Secret Skin essay, Michael Chabon talks about how fantasy can be negative and positive depending on the person to whom it's presented. In the article, he refers to fantasy as pretty lies, which was taught to him by an instructor when he was young, but he also refers to fantasy with positive words such as an escape or a transformation. Fantasy can be both of those things. He makes the point that fantasy is not realistic, and that's not the point of fantasy, and it shouldn't try to be realistic. An example he heavily uses throughout this article are superheroes. Superheroes are an entirely unrealistic concept, from their appearance, to their abilities, to their morals, right down to their costumes. They're just entirely ridiculous and unrealistic once you think about it, but we all still love superheroes, we all can relate to them, and that just shows the human's love of fantasy. He also makes the point that superheroes can be metaphors of Superheroes can be metaphors of the problems that many people in life face. For example, a superhero's costume is meant to hide and conceal their identity, but it often ends up doing the opposite. It displays the hero's entire narrative along with their deepest and darkest secrets. For example, Batman, he wears black to hide himself, but he also, the black color could be in reference to mourning as he lost his parents at a very young age. Next, I'm going to talk about the rhetorical act reading, which was chapter 12. This chapter discusses the nonverbal element to persuasive speech, visual rhetoric. Images can convey a powerful message, and they can be used very effectively to bolster rhetorical speech. With 21st century technology, taking pictures and editing pictures using Photoshop is easier than it ever has been, and as images are powerful rhetorical tools, it is very easy to manipulate a picture to support your rhetoric and convince an audience. The chapter then discussed the 3 principles of visual rhetoric, the first being that visual messages are pervasive and threaten to eclipse the influence of the spoken and written word in the 21st century. And this means that visual media is taking over and non-visual media is being phased out. Like, you see people watching TV much more than you see people reading newspapers and listening to the radio nowadays, because it's more widely available and it's more technologically advanced and appealing to people in the modern setting. The next principle of visual rhetoric is that visual messages are volatile, eliciting positive and negative responses simultaneously. And this is a statement about the power of images and how they can draw out many different kinds of reactions from a person. Like, when an American sees a picture of 9/11, they are filled with sadness because they remember everyone remembers that day, September 11th, 2001. I think I wasn't even 1 year old yet, but everyone remembers that morning when the planes hit the towers. They know how many lives it cost, they know what it cost our nation, they know what came after. They know how much we had to heal, there was a war, how much we had to heal as a nation just because of that one event. And so when you see a picture of that, it can draw so many emotions at once. And that's just one picture, and that's a statement to how powerful a picture can be. The last principle of visual rhetoric was visual messages are efficient, emotional, and enthematic in the way that they persuade. And this means that basically there's a story in every picture. When you look at a picture, you can tell what's going on before, what's going on during, and what's going on after. They're very efficient in telling a story. They almost have layers. Like, if you look at a picture of the Tiananmen Square, the very famous picture with the man standing in front of that tank, you know what happened before that picture. You can obviously see what's going on during. You can see the man taking what he believed to the next level. He's putting himself in front of an armored, like, 60-ton vehicle. We don't know what happened to him after, but we can assume it was nothing good. And so that's an example of how a picture can tell a story. When you see that picture, you know exactly what's going on and you can read between the layers. Next, the chapter discussed the core visual messages, what's in every picture, or what makes up every picture. Figure and ground, shapes and space, balance and direction, and then lastly, color and lighting. And all of these elements bind together in an image and determine how clear the image is. And this is important because the clarity of an image determines how effectively it can be used alongside rhetorical speech. Back to the Tiananmen Square picture, you know exactly what's going on the moment you look at it. Now, lastly, the chapter touched on some problems with visual rhetoric. When overused, it can divert audience attention away from your speech and onto the images, and thus weakening the power of your spoken rhetoric. So images are to be used sparingly because they are so powerful, and you don't want to diminish that power in your rhetorical speech. That was what I learned during week 5 reading. Thank you very much.